put it. Is everybody here? Yes. Okay. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new event here on AUK Honor Society presentations. We have 3 students who have worked for the last year on their projects, and today's presentation we're going to have Herolinda Zenouni, we're going to have Arif Hoti, and we're going to have Lourdes Chahaya. The first student, Herolinda Zenouni, will talk about taxpayers' rights in Kosovo. So Herolinda, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. As a mentor just mentioned, my topic is on taxpayers' rights in Kosovo. Shortly, this is the content of my presentation. I will briefly introduce my topic, just a little bit of background information. I will explain my methodology, how I did the research. I will focus mostly on findings and analysis of results. In the end, I also have a case study to share, which came up during the research, and conclusion and recommendations. As I said, my topic focused on a specific section of the tax system, which is taxpayers' rights. In Kosovo, there is little attention given to taxpayers' rights, either by researchers, by tax authorities, and by taxpayers themselves, which leads to cases of violating taxpayers' rights. This problem of violations is further highlighted by the low level of awareness among taxpayers regarding their rights and the complexities of the tax legislation itself, which leads to cases of violations whereby taxpayers might not even be aware of their rights being violated. Cases of violating taxpayers' rights hinder the attainment of an effective tax system, since greater voluntary compliance is based upon a sense of trust and fairness in the tax system and between taxpayers and tax authorities. There are many reasons why I chose this topic and why it is very important for us to consider, but to wrap them all up in one sentence, I have to say that it is highly important for tax authorities to focus on protecting taxpayers' rights, because they not only have an impact on the on greater compliance of taxpayers, but they also have an impact on the level of investments and business activity in a country. While we are experiencing low economic growth and we have a very high unemployment rate, the cases of violating taxpayers' rights only make matters worse, because they have an impact on they worsen the relationship between businesses, between taxpayers and tax authorities, and result in a loss of trust between the two. Based on the tax legislation of Kosovo and the Taxpayers Charter, taxpayers have the following rights. First of all, the right to be served by the tax administration of Kosovo. Second, the right to equality as one of our basic rights as human beings. Further on, they have the right to privacy and confidentiality. This means that no taxpayer will be subject to an unlawful investigation of them. Further on, the right to be informed, assisted, and heard. Taxpayers have the right to be informed within the time limit specified by the law for any request or complaint they may have filed with the tax administration. Further on, they have the right to be assisted in meeting their obligations and to receive explanations if they require them. Another right is the right to pay only the correct amount. While it is their obligation to pay their taxes and any liabilities they have, it is their right to pay only the correct amount and receive any excess that they have paid back. Further on, one of the major taxpayers' rights is the right to appeal. Taxpayers have the right to appeal to the tax administration if they believe that an error has occurred or they have been treated unfairly. There is a special division within the tax administration which deals with taxpayers' appeals. It is the appeals division. Further on, if taxpayers are not satisfied with a decision of the appeals division, they have the right to further complain and appeal. Up to this year, they could appeal to the Independent Review Board, which is a board of members independent of the tax administration, which would then review the case and decide and resolve it. However, now the appeal goes directly to the court, so after the appeals division, they can appeal directly to the court. Also, taxpayers, in case they have paid an excess amount or they have the right to receive an amount back, they can file a claim for a reimbursement, and they have to receive it from. They have to receive the refund from the tax administration. Due to the nature of the problem, I did a qualitative research. Since there is a lack of publications regarding taxpayers' rights in Kosovo, I had to collect most of the information by primary methods of research. However, I also consulted secondary sources. Initially, I reviewed publications on this issue from international organizations and well-known scholars. Further on, I analyzed all of the materials available on the tax administration of Kosovo website. These materials helped me understand the basics of the taxpayers' rights and the tax system in Kosovo. Regarding primary research, I conducted in total 11 interviews and sent out 167 surveys, questionnaires, although they were not all responded to. From the interviews, I had representatives from the Ministry of Finance. I interviewed the manager of the Taxpayer Education Division from the Tax Administration of Kosovo. Further on, I interviewed 3 other employees from the Taxpayer Service Division of the Tax Administration. I also interviewed a tax expert and previous member of the Independent Review Board. Also, I interviewed taxpayers, obviously. From larger businesses, larger taxpayers, I had representatives of some large businesses in Kosovo, such as Meridian Corporation, Viva Fresh Store, and Nugabest. Further on, I interviewed 4 other taxpayers, smaller taxpayers, which have smaller private businesses. In addition, I conducted 2 small-scale surveys, one with larger businesses and one with smaller businesses. The sampling method for both of these surveys was by convenience due to limited time and resources. Therefore, I acknowledge that this cannot be representative of the whole taxpayer community. However, it can serve to highlight up to an extent the most important issues taxpayers face in Kosovo. In total, I sent out 137 questionnaires to large businesses, and I received 31 in response, while for smaller taxpayers, all of them, 30 of them, responded. In addition to the lack of possibility to have a representative sample, there were other limitations to the methodology, such as the lack of willingness to respond by participants, both in the interviews and surveys, as well as the lack of publications on taxpayers' rights in Kosovo. During my research, I have analyzed and assessed all of the rights of taxpayers. However, due to the time here, I have summarized all of them in 3 of the main problems which are encountered in enforcing taxpayers' rights and some of the most common violations. According to literature on taxpayers' rights, there are 3 problems with enforcing taxpayers' rights. First of all, the first one, which is less problematic for Kosovo, is the lack of professional experts. Because when there is a lack of experts on tax matters, taxpayers have few possibilities to consult someone regarding their rights, and as a result, they might have violations when they're not even aware of them. However, based on the interviews I did with the representatives from the Ministry of Finance and the other 4 employees of the tax administration, they claim that our tax administration is equipped with professional employees, and they are all capable of assisting taxpayers in whatever needs they have and explaining to them the procedures. The second one, which is more problematic for Kosovo, is the lack of education and the ignorance of taxpayer rights. The lack of education further on makes the enforcement of taxpayers' rights more difficult, because not only are taxpayers not aware of their rights, but they also do not appreciate taxes and the tax system overall. The results of my research show that overall taxpayers do not fully understand their rights, neither do they the tax system overall. Among the factors which are leading to this, according to taxpayers themselves, is the tax legislation itself, which is not only complex and difficult to understand, but they claim that they encounter many inconsistencies and gaps, ambiguities, whereby they say that these gaps leave room for multiple interpretations and manipulation with the law. This is a table of some of the questions I asked during the surveys and the responses from taxpayers. I will not go into detail into all of them because there are also other questions, but several things can be highlighted from these results. Overall, it can be said that a considerable portion of the taxpayers are not even aware of the basics of the tax system, such as the tax rates, let alone their rights or any of the other procedures. This shows that there is much room for improvement in the level of education regarding tax matters, and this has also been supported by the interviews with the tax administration of Kosovo. The third problem, which is also more of an issue in Kosovo, is due to inefficient investigation procedures. When the procedure of following up the complaints of taxpayers is slow and inefficient, there is a drag in handling tax cases, and this can be a problem because one of the major rights of taxpayers is the right to appeal. The slow and inefficient process of appealing has been one of the most frequent responses from my research, both from interviews and surveys, whereby taxpayers claim that they hesitate to appeal because they expect an exhaustive and long process of appealing, whereby they will have to provide too much documentation and it will take them too much time and it will result in more costs for them. Another finding of my research is that there is a perception among the taxpaying community that the tax administration can take advantage and exploit the taxpayers which are already complying in order to compensate for the large amount of taxes which are being evaded. This is because there are two groups within the taxpaying community. There are those taxpayers which comply and pay their taxes, and those that evade paying taxes. And the tax administration has a direct link only with this first group of those taxpayers that pay, because the second group, these taxpayers that are already evading, they have already figured out a way to avoid this link completely, or at least up to an extent. So this is why taxpayers believe that there is this perception that tax administration in one way attacks or has the possibility to attack taxpayers which are complying and overcharge them with taxes. Overcharging of taxes by tax inspectors has also been reported to be one of the most frequent appeals which are directed to the Independent Review Board. Here I have a list of just some of the most frequent complaints which are made to the Independent Review Board, and this information has been collected by a previous member of the Independent Review Board, a previous vice president. One of these most frequent complaints is the overcharging of VAT or corporate income tax by tax inspectors based on the open market value. This depends on the sector we are talking about. For example, in the hotel sector, tax inspectors make an assessment based on observations they do in hotels, restaurants, coffee shops, just based on an hour a day, mostly the rush hour, and then they charge these businesses on a monthly basis, which results in overcharges for them. In the trade sector, this occurs mainly when tax inspectors use one single price to account for all of the different brands of the same product. For example, if a company is selling 10 different washing machines, they're all different quality brands, and also they have different prices. They have been overcharged with taxes because all of these different washing machines have been accounted with the price of the single most expensive one. In the construction sector, overcharges in taxes mainly occur due to the lack of knowledge among tax inspectors in calculating and estimating construction costs, whereby they overestimate them. Also, it was stated that this is a result of the tax legislation, which is incomplete for construction services. The second of these most common complaints is due to the overcharge of corporate income tax, due to the fact that tax inspectors do not accept the depreciation method of those assets which have been appraised by certified appraisers. When the cost of acquisition is very low, in harmony with international financial reporting standards and the tax legislation, it can be equalized to the open market value of that asset. However, when some companies' assessment is done for tax purposes, assessment of their wealth or real estate, tax inspectors only accept the cost of acquisition, which is low, and they do not accept the open market value of that asset, which is why many companies have appealed to have this assessment be based upon the open market value, so that they can have a higher base of depreciation for tax purposes. And the third is non-application of interstate agreements between countries to avoid double taxation and the damage done to Kosovo businesses. This occurs because Kosovo businesses, which also have economic activity and generate income from other countries, they pay taxes in those other countries, but then they are also charged for the same income from the tax administration of Kosovo, and this results in double taxation of these businesses. Overall, all of these cases violate a fundamental right of taxpayers, that to pay no more than the correct amount, because in each case these taxpayers have been charged with more than they are liable for. However, even if these cases are resolved to the taxpayers' favor, there are consequences for them, because during the whole appeal procedure, either through the appeals division or the independent review board, even when they go to courts, taxpayers, according to the tax legislation, are obliged to pay their duties and any interest that accumulates on them. However, this poses difficulties for cash flow for the businesses. However, even if in the end the taxpayer wins the case, this amount is supposed to be reimbursed to them. However, from my interviews, what they told me is that they do not actually receive the cash that they have the right to, but what happens is this amount it remains in their account as a credit balance, so that it can be deducted from future liabilities. But even in this case, it is a net loss for taxpayers, because when you have to deal with large amounts, this amount is staying idle in an account and it is not being compounded, and its net present value is less than the amount which could have been reimbursed. Now I have a case study which relates to all of the violations of taxpayers' rights that I assessed. It has to do with 3CIS. 3CIS is a Kosovar company which provides highly specialized services to some of the largest telecommunication carriers around the world. In 2011, it was awarded the Best Small Medium-Sized Business Award, as well as it was awarded as the Best Exporter of 2011. However, late this year in April, a sad story was revealed by the board members of the company. Lately, 3CIS was put through an exhaustive audit of all of its years of operation for 5 years. The results of the audit revealed that 3CIS book accuracy was 99.99%. However, in the absence of any discrepancy or obligation found during the audit, they were illegitimately charged for non-payment of VAT. However, 3CIS is an exporting company. All of its services are exported outside of Kosovo, and they should not be liable for VAT. They even claim that they have an official document from the tax administration which states that they should not be charged for VAT. According to 3CIS, they say that this penalty was charged upon a misinterpretation of the law and the term place of supply specifically, which is supposed to mean the place where the services are supplied, where they are consumed by consumers, which means countries outside of Kosovo and not Kosovo. And also the VAT rate on exports is 0 in Kosovo. Despite everything, the tax administration continued to force 3CIS to pay, and they report that they even received threats for greater penalties if they did not agree to pay the penalty now. As a result, 3CIS ended up with a bill, with an unexpected and unaffordable bill of 530,000 euros. and as a result of this, they had to significantly cut down their costs. And since labor costs were their greater costs, they laid down 20% of their labor force, which I think is from 150 employees that they had. Further on, Article 78 of the Law on Tax Administration and Procedures states that the members of the Independent Review Board, which are supposed to be reviewing the appeals coming from the Appeals Division, they are supposed to be independent of the Ministry of Finance, which means they should also be independent of the tax administration. But according to 3CIS, what they stated is that the members of the board which was reviewing their case were simply another group of employees of the tax administration. 3CIS is now pursuing court proceedings. In the meantime, they state that this has significantly impaired their ability to function properly. And also they state that they are considering taking their business outside of Kosovo. As a result of all of this, several things can be highlighted. The fact, which was also stated during my interviews and surveys, that there are gaps and inconsistencies in the legislation which give room to the authorities to misinterpret it and manipulate with it to the disadvantage of taxpayers. Further on, I had also other interviews that said that they receive threats if they do not agree to pay the penalties that they got. They receive threats that they will be penalized even more with more fines. Further on, there are greater costs for companies even during the appeal proceedings because of consulting services and what they have to pay. And as a result of all of this, there is a loss in the trust between taxpayers and the tax authorities. This disincentivizes businesses to continue their activity in Kosovo as well as to continue paying taxes because of unfair competition. And as a result of all of these, several rights of taxpayers are violated. First of all, their right to fair and equal treatment, because businesses such as these are not treated equally and fairly to the other businesses and what they actually state in the tax legislation. Also, the fundamental right to pay only the correct amount and no more than that, since they are charged illegitimately for what they should not be. And the right to appeal, which is either directly violated, such as in 3CIS's case, where the board, which is supposed to be independent to review their appeal, is actually not independent and is part of the tax administration, or indirectly by making the appeal procedure so long and exhaustive that it is very unattractive for taxpayers to appeal. Overall, there are two ways you can make taxpayers pay their taxes. You either force them through audits and fines, or you motivate them to comply voluntarily. However, forcing taxpayers to pay would result in more costs because you would have to do a lot of audits and inspections, and they all use up sources. And even if this approach has been used up to today, it has not been proven successful since we still have a high level of tax evasion. A more efficient and better approach, I believe, would be to motivate taxpayers to comply voluntarily, and this would be done by creating mechanisms that would guarantee the protection of taxpayers' rights, because this way you would gain their trust. The cases of violation I have analyzed during my research show that there are consequences beyond the individual costs that taxpayers whose rights are violated face. Cases such as 3CIS, they show that there are greater consequences for the economy of the country because they create barriers for businesses in conducting economic activity in Kosovo and paying taxes. In the current situation of our economy, new investments and businesses should be promoted, and current taxpayers should be supported, not demotivated. As a result of my research, I have come up with just a few recommendations. They are more briefly explained in the paper. These are based on the issues that were raised during the research. First of all, since the tax legislation itself was reported to be one of the main issues, I recommend that, first of all, the tax legislation is reviewed and improved so that the inconsistencies and these gaps that taxpayers say they are removed so that there is no space for the tax authorities to misuse them and manipulate with them to the disadvantage of taxpayers. Further on, the lack of education was also resulted to be problematic. Therefore, it is important to invest in increasing the level of education regarding tax matters among taxpayers. There is also something which I could not go into detail during the analysis, but it is in the paper. It was reported that the tax administration already holds many seminars and trainings for taxpayers in order to educate them, but by taxpayers it was reported that these seminars focus more on how taxpayers should pay their taxes and how to fulfill their obligations rather than their rights. I had one taxpayer say it is different when they come to you and say this is what you should do, this is how you should pay, and it is something else when they come and tell you, okay, these are your rights and this is what you can do. Further on, the appeal procedure was very important and problematic to enforcing taxpayers' rights. Therefore, in order to improve the situation, the appeal procedure could be made less exhaustive and less costly. The simplest of these could be to make the appealing procedure electronic. The tax administration has already made many services available through their website. Lately, they have also done electronic declaration, and in a similar manner, the appeal could also be made electronically, so that taxpayers could appeal from their homes or whenever they wish, and it would be less costly for them. This was all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for your wonderful presentation. We have 10 minutes for questions and comments. The floor is yours.
Okay. Dr. Bryan?
Please go back to your chart to explain your results, please, your survey results.
Okay. Here, I was going to highlight some of them, but it just took too much time. It must be highlighted that 27% of the respondents do not even know the basics of the tax legislation, the tax rates, and they're very simple. And this is even greater among smaller taxpayers, which was an issue raised during the interviews. They said that smaller taxpayers are even more disadvantaged because some of them do not have an economic background, are not familiar even with the tax system, which further on makes it makes them more prone to their rights being violated. Also, almost half, 42% of the taxpayers have never read anything from the tax legislation, meaning they're...
Sorry, when you say smaller, you talk about
individual taxpayers. I divided them based on how the businesses are divided. Larger taxpayers like corporations, and smaller taxpayers, those that are not subject to corporate income tax, but personal income tax, because they have smaller businesses, private businesses.
So the smaller ones, they're the 30 people you sent it to?
Yes.
And the large ones, the corporations?
Yes. I had 30 responses from both of them, but I sent more questionnaires to the corporations because their willingness to respond is lower. And 40% of those that said that they have read something from the tax legislation, they reported that they encountered difficulties in understanding it, as well as the gaps that they have stated.
To me, it seems a very valuable chart, this one. I was just wondering, do you have any surprises when you saw these numbers? Or do you think it's fairly predictable what comes up there?
I didn't have any predictions prior to doing it because I didn't really have any idea how they stand with this, but I expected a little more from the larger taxpayers. They should be fairly familiar. Yes, Professor?
It just seems really important to almost everybody who pays taxes. But for your recommendation on educating, you mentioned focus groups. Could the media be employed to do spot things on television to say, do you know your rights? And would you like to be on TV?
Yes, that would be a good idea. From my interview with the manager of the taxpayer education, he said that they have really employed all the means possible to educate taxpayers, but I think he was focusing more on the obligation side, because he said we have even made ads with children to state how important it is to pay your taxes. But really, as the other taxpayers said, it's different when they tell you what you have to do and what you have to pay, and the importance of paying, and it's different when they tell you what you have the right to do.
I would love to see spot sections saying, did you know that you can appeal? Of course, it sounds like the appeal process is really complicated.
That's what they stated.
Yeah, if I can add that, I mean, that was also very difficult for Marina to conduct research, because we've been working together. You know, there hasn't been no research on this. People didn't even know that there are, rights that they have to go for. They have to go through the appealing process. So it was also, it was like a learning process and trying to see,
We need to
What people
advocate
know about
for
this,
the
yeah.
taxpayer bill of rights. Start working on it.
Okay.
There is another problem or a violation for the terms of the individual taxpayers' rights, that is linked to the personal income tax. In personal income tax, brackets are calculated on an annual basis, but the implementation is
On a monthly.
So it means whoever has worked temporarily for less than 4 months or 5 months has the right to claim back the amount of tax paid, but the tax authorities never inform citizens of this right. As a result, actually, the rights of those that are mostly needed are mostly violated. These are people that work only temporarily. And just a short question for you. You say that the perception of the tax authority is that they have enough of professional staff and experts. Did you observe that perception from your interview there?
Actually, when I just started the research, I hadn't even started the writing or anything. I asked a tax employee. I told them this is my topic, and immediately they're like, "Okay, yes, I will tell you the most basic rights of the taxpayers," and they said it's their right to pay their liabilities.
that explains.
Explains a lot.
One more question.
Mental right 4. One is short, the other 3 are combined.
Okay.
The first one is you did a case study. What was the dependent variable in your case study? What was the research question in your case study?
This case study is based on what the board members stated, and they have published this article. I tried to contact them, but they are very stressed with this topic because it just happened lately, and they did not accept to talk to me, but they said, we have said everything that there is to say about this case in the press release.
No, I'm asking, what was the dependent variable? What was the research question you were trying to deal with?
How their rights were violated, how 3CIS rights were violated.
Okay, so you went in with the assumption that the rights were violated then?
Yes.
Okay. Second question, and these 3 all are combined. How did you develop the survey questions? How are they reviewed and approved? And what process for institutional review was done for the human subject research that you carried out?
The first one was how I made the questions. Through the surveys, I tried to understand mostly what their level of awareness is. Therefore, I made most of the questions, actually I think all of them were yes, no, close-ended. I would say, are you aware of this? Not do you know, for example, but are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? Although I encouraged them to give feedback and anything they wish to share from their experience. Then I reviewed the questions with my supervisor. We made any changes which, for example, some questions might have been misleading, so we made the adjustments so that they were like, just are you aware, and they would not be leading, and I distributed them. What was the other question?
The IRB process. the process of having the institution review the survey, get it approved before it's done, all that kind of stuff?
I think honest students are not even aware of this process. This is the problem from our side.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Herolinda Zanouni, Taxpayers' Rights in Kosovo, with special acknowledgement to Project Supervisor Professor Venera Demukai and Project Advisors Professor Besnik Bislimi and Burim Hassani. The second student that's coming up is Arif Hoti, with his title, The Export Potential of Kosovo's Natural Resources and Their Impact on the Kosovo Economy, with the Project Supervisor Alicia English, Project Advisor Mrika Kotori, and Ron Daladako. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mentor. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you very much for having come to my presentation. It is about minerals and metals, which, as you will see, is the most significant potential that Kosovo has from an export point of view. Can I? The title is The Export Potential of Kosovo's Natural Resources and Their Possible Impact on the Kosovo Economy. So it's not only about what we have, but it is also about what we can do with what we have and how it might impact the economy. This is the outline of my presentation, forward and introduction. Then I will talk about trade statistics, which is very important if you talk about exports, and this is the point where you diagnostify that we have a huge trade deficit. Then I will talk about mining and mineral potential, then about each of the metals or resources that have a huge potential in themselves. Bauxite, for instance, gold, silver, manganese, magnesium, and rare minerals. We have apparently very much resources which can benefit our economy. Halloysites, other resources, and then I will sum up all the resources that I encountered during my research, and I will attempt to give combined value of all these resources. Then I will talk about value adding, which is also very important, since the most profit is not made when you sell something in its raw form. You will have to process it in order to make most profit of it. And I will do the analysis and the conclusion. So this topic began only about Kosovo's trade potential. It is very vague, but soon I found out that it is impossible to talk about Kosovo's export potential without mentioning minerals and metals. So in other words, natural resources. You can't avoid natural resources if you want to increase Kosovo's export. We don't have any other sector which has this potential, and soon I found out. So the final title became The Economic Potential of Kosovo's Natural Resources and Their Possible Impacts. So as I told you, I began with trade. Soon I found out that there are many problems with our trade balance. In 2011 we exported 319 million, but imported 2.5 billion. This is tremendous. This is 10%, something more than 10%. This is terrific. So the worst about this statistic is that the money leaves Kosovo. We cannot make use of the multiplier effect, and we support jobs in other countries. We do not support jobs in our country. That's the most significant problem with this sector, with trade. So for every €1 that we that we receive in Kosovo, we send out 7.8 euros. So you see, this is the money that leaves our country. This is the money that enters our country. You can see there's not much left. Another problem with the trade balance, with our trade, is that 70% of income of the budget comes from customs. So it is basically based on customs and the revenues from that sector. So that is a problem because we aspire EU integration, and once we are part of the EU, you won't have that revenue. So we have to consider that. So we must increase exports. We have to do that. There is no other way around. We won't be able to create budget revenues when we enter EU, so we have to increase exports. That's the only way to improve our position. But how? That's the question. What do we have? One. Where is our comparative advantage? The answer, according to USAID, lies in these three sectors: natural resources, land, and labor. And I was picky, choosy, and I wanted to find which one of these has the most potential. And I looked at the statistics, and as you can see, the composition of trade statistics of the exports in 2011 were we exported, most of our exports were manufactured goods classified chiefly by material, not by the work of humans, if you can say so. The second most significant part of exports was crude materials, inedible except fuels. So you can see 78% of our exports in 2011 were materials, not classified by labor. So it is apparently not the craftsmanship of our citizens that is required by other countries. It is simply the materials as it is, preferably untouched by human hand. And so just to give an example, ferronickel, which produces nickel and iron, exported half of all of these exports, which were low. And you see that only one company exported half of that. So imagine if ferronickel wouldn't exist at all. We would export even less. So the Ministry of Economic Development created this mining strategy, which points out that these minerals have the most potential. It is lignite, lead and zinc, silver and gold, nickel, cobalt, iron, nickel, bauxite, and manganese. These metals and minerals are the potential of Kosovo's economy. So then I found out that Kosovo is so rich, has always been so rich, that even the Romans mined in Kosovo. Modern mining began in the 1930s, but the problem is that we do not utilize these mines currently. That's a problem. We had them during Yugoslav times, and Trepča, the mine in Mitrovica, was one of the most important pillars of the economy at that time, but we have only 4 mines operating at this moment, and partially not even at their full potential. Share of industry of this sector was 47% in 1988. So we are not utilizing it at this moment. That's a problem. So then I began to analyze every metal or mineral and what's the potential behind that, and I also tried out to find out whether there is demand, not only supply, because we can supply them apparently, but will there be demand, and what's the forecast for the future demand. Coal, we have 14.7 billion tons of coal. This is the fifth largest amount on the entire planet. According to a German newspaper, we can produce electricity with that coal for another 200 years. According to the British Guardian, we can consume coal for another 1,500 years. And the Guardian goes even further and says that the value of our coal might be as much as 1 trillion. That's terrific. So this is just a graph which will highlight Kosovo's importance when it comes to coal. You see all these large countries, Germany, Australia, USA, China, and there stands small Kosovo with the 5th largest reserves on the world. Then I found out that the prospects for the coal sector are positive, even though it is assumed, even though countries of Western Europe are trying to avoid the consumption of coal because of CO2, but I found out in one of the papers that there is no way around it. It will be simply too costly to avoid coal. So therefore, there will always be, at least in the near future, there will be demand for coal, and you can see the projections are going up, not down. So this sector has potential in the near future. Excuse me. So besides the economic effect that these entire amounts of coal might have on our economy, I also assessed that it will make us, from an energy perspective, independent. And you know that many countries in the world fight for energy, and many, it is assumed that wars and conflicts are created because of energy. And so I wanted to point out that, at least from an energy perspective, we can call ourselves independent. Obstacles are organizational problems in this sector. I want to point out the example with ferronickel and KEK, where ferronickel, which apparently exports a lot and has that factory which uses coal, imported coal from Indonesia. That's crazy, if I can say so. We have all that coal in Kosovo, but ferronickel imported coal from Indonesia and Malaysia because there were organizational problems in KEK. So we have to improve that. We have to get rid of these organizational problems and make use of them. And new mines have to be opened. There are several mines that the two most important mines have been closed recently, and we need to open more mines in order to utilize these benefits. Lead and zinc, according to Deputy Minister of Environment and Spatial Planning, which I interviewed for this research, lead and zinc is even probably more important than coal, and you saw how important coal is. He said that, I read that, well, the lead and zinc resources in Kosovo are world-class quality. And the minister, and you see it's in brackets, it's paraphrased, the minister said that this is the catalyst of the Kosovo economy. If we utilize lead and zinc, it might be the catalyst of our economy. And these resources are mostly in Trepča, so this is about Trepča. You see that we have 2 million tons of each of both of them. The obstacles in this sector are apparently a lack of legislation, as with all other sectors in Kosovo by now. There have been recent improvements though, and the minister also told me that the government prefers public-private partnerships. So in the near future you might see many public-private partnerships in this sector because it is the preferred form of the government of Kosovo. And the minister also told me that we need 200 million of investments in this sector to revive it. And within 3 or 5 years, we will have that potential that Trepča once had during Yugoslav times, and we might use it for ourselves. And he said that it suffices for 40 years. The resources in Trepča, at least for 40 years. It might be 60. He also said that we are a regional power when it comes to lead and zinc, and that the demand for this resource is guaranteed because China needs a lot of it. And that's why there are good prospects also in this sector, which is one of the 2 most important sectors along lignite. And you see lead and zinc, the lines are going up for the near future. So you can see that a good future expects us if we make use of that, if we know how to utilize that. Ferronickel, as I told you before, exported 100 million, which is half of the entire exports of our country. One company, half of the entire exports. And this is the only company that approached pre-1999, pre-1990 sectors, excuse me. That's the only company that approached its pre-war level of operations. It currently employs 1,000 people, which is comparatively a huge number. We have also other minerals and metals that are very important that might even bring us billions. We have bauxites, gold and silver. Gold not that much anymore, but we have silver. The value of the entire silver in Kosovo amounts up to 2 billion, only from silver. We have manganese and we have magnesium. I would like to tell about magnesium that the demand is assumed to be guaranteed because new cars, new vehicles are being produced with lighter metals, and magnesium is such a metal. It is lighter than the other metals that are being used for car production right now. So a very prospective sector, and that might guarantee the demand for this sector and even increase prices for our magnesium. We have rare minerals that can be used for LCDs and electronics and medical applications, biomedical applications. We have also halloysite. Regarding the rare minerals, this might enable the creation of sectors which deal with electronics, and so that might be a value-added sector where we do not only export things in their raw form, but also add value to products and make more profit out of it. Halloysite is a very rare mineral. Kosovo is one of only 5 countries in the entire world which has this mineral. So we are one of 5 places on the entire earth where you can find halloysite. And projections say that its demand is going to increase dramatically during the near future. And there are also other minerals and resources which we have in Kosovo, and this is what I did. I found the amount of every mineral and metal, and I found the price for each one of them, which was not easy because many internet platforms do not want you to know the current price. They give you prices that are older because you can make money out of it. That's and then I calculated the total endowment value for each mineral and metal, and you see we have 5 billion worth of lead, for instance, or zinc. So lead and zinc alone are worth 10 billion. And then I did this for every mineral and metal, and then I came to one conclusion, that we have 22 billion worth of natural resources, mines, minerals and metals. 22 billion, that's 22 times our GDP. So, and I was quite close to a paper which comes from Economic Initiative for Kosovo, which has its headquarters in Vienna and which attempts to promote Kosovo, the Kosovo economy, which assumes that we have natural resources worth of 13.5 billion to 25 billion. So I was in that range. I also want to talk about value adding. I mentioned it before, the process of adding value to something and then exporting it and making more profit out of it. Here you see an example with steel. You see the blue line is iron ore, so in its raw form. That's what we do in Kosovo. We export things in their raw form. But if you make steel out of that iron ore, you see how much more money you may get. And you see that there is a terrific potential, and that table that I just showed you is not the final answer. We can make even more if we use that process, if we add value to our resource. Excuse me. And then I use the CGE model to analyze what impacts these values might have in our economy, because it is apparently not enough to have them in your economy, you also need to utilize them and have find buyers, purchasers for those resources. And I tried to attempt to see how exporting minerals and metals might improve our economy by increasing taxes, by increasing employment, and by reducing social transfers, since many of the people that would be employed in these sectors are low laborers, have low skills when it comes to labor. So I made these assumptions in my analysis. I assumed no secondary jobs, so I just estimated the jobs that would be created based on ferronickel, lead and zinc, and lignite. So only based on these three, and I did not assume any other additional jobs that might be created due to the creation of these jobs. So I used only the numbers of these three most important potentials. I did not use the number for bauxites or for silver and gold. I just considered these three in the analysis. I considered an average wage of 368 euros, which is the average wage in the public sector in Kosovo. And another assumption was I either used experts' opinions in order to determine the number of jobs that might be created, or pre-war operations. So what did Trepča in 1990? I used that number. So I used that as a potential. And I used the current tax rate. And I considered only income taxes, not corporate taxes, to make it more simple. And I considered a marginal propensity to consume of 0.8. So this means that we consume 80% of our incomes and save 20% of what is our income. So I found out that we might create 60,000 new jobs. 60,000 new jobs only from these three sectors. The energy sector might provide 35,000 jobs. Lead and zinc, 22,000 jobs. So you see, that's Trepča's potential, lead and zinc. And ferronickel, 2,000. 1,000 are already employed, but we can have 2,000. There are 70,000 jobs in public administration, which is the most significant sector in Kosovo. So you see that we can employ all these people, and that sector might compete with the public sector, and this sector produces something. That's the difference. So our citizens might enjoy another additional income of 22 million per month. This is in the pockets of the citizens. And additional income of 260 million per year. So our citizens will be much richer if we invest in these sectors. Then I calculated what might happen to GDP if we utilized all of these sectors. I found out that the multiplier, Keynesian multiplier, would be 5, and I also assumed that we would not import things with that money, so it would stay in the economy. And if that money would stay in the economy and we would buy our own goods, we could improve GDP by 1.3 billion, which is approximately 25% of the entire GDP. So just by utilizing these resources. Effects on tax revenues, I estimated that we might enjoy another 11 million in tax revenues per year. I told you before that customs is the sector that brings most revenues to our government, and you see that only by utilizing this sector and employing all these people with that average wage of 368 euros, we might receive 11 million more in taxes every year. And there is also another effect on social transfers. I told you that miners usually do not have high quality skills. That's low labor skills, and we have 30,000 families that live on social assistance right now. And assuming that 3,000 of these families would be employed, we might reduce that number by 10%, for instance. It says that 7,000 new jobs in the mining, 7,000 new jobs exclusively for miners might be created. So you can see that we could have 20% less social transfers. So also non-monetary benefits, we might enjoy a better investment climate, because investing in natural resources needs laws and a good climate for natural resources, and investors, foreign investors, would see that huge companies trust Kosovo with their wealth, and so they might purchase, they might also get into the mineral sector in Kosovo, and less informality. It is this is also one finding. You cannot mine without a license. It is very difficult. You cannot do these operations without being seen by others, and so that might decrease the informality in this sector and in the Kosovo economy, because you would have to interact with this sector. And so this is the conclusion. USAID says that it is in Kosovo's own hands to make the best out of it. That's the best of this presentation. But we should avoid the resource curse, which says that, which suggests that countries that have many natural resources usually do not do well. And we have to avoid that. We have to follow Norway's example and not invest everything at the same time. We have to be prudent with economics, with spending from that sector, and that's how we might become another country like Dubai or Norway, which really benefits from its natural resources. And we need better infrastructure. We need a railway which connects our resources with the port of Durrës in Albania, and we need engineers. We do not have the labor that can be employed in this sector. We also need to take care of efficiency and sustainability, not to deplete everything and leave something for the other generations that will come. Okay, I thank you very much for listening to me, and I have. Did I exceed time?
For the wonderful presentation, we have 10 minutes of questions.
Yes, $200 million euro investment required to get the mining.
Yeah.
That includes infrastructure to be required.
We didn't go into that during the interview, but he told me that it is 200 million in order to reach its full operations.
Because that's going to be critical of that infrastructure export.
That's what the minister said. But he also added that, for example, we cannot build a railroad because that would be too costly, and we built the highway to Albania, but we missed building a parallel railroad to that, so this chance is gone, and that will be very difficult. So he probably meant investments in machines. Mentor, do you choose or?
All right, my question is a little different. Your basic recommendation at the end of the day is that we should invest in resource extraction.
Yes,
right?
It is not the best solution for an economy, but it is the first solution if you want to develop fast.
And that's your recommendation.
Yes.
for Kosovo now. So my question is, given the level of assumed corruption that we have in Kosovo, is this really a good recommendation?
I did not go into that.
I'm not asking you what you
Yes,
I'm just asking you a question. Based on your work, what do you think?
Corruption is a huge problem, and it would inhibit much of that potential that we might enjoy. But I focus on the economic side, not on the political side. But it's apparent. I mentioned the resource curse, and I'm afraid of that might happen in my country as well, where countries that are very rich in natural resources, like countries in Africa, and they didn't enjoy anything. It was just a corrupt elite that became rich, and the people they had to fight wars, and they suffered because of these resources. But I do not think that Kosovo is in such a state.
Yeah, I have a question regarding those employment. If I recall correctly, the paper said that there would be almost 190,000 employees in the sector, including the administration employees. How did you come up with those?
You mean the 60,000 jobs that I assumed?
Yeah, there were 60,000, but some other numbers was almost 190,000.
The other number was in a paper, 70,000 employees in the public sector, and I found my project. I found out that the German economist said that we can have 35,000 jobs in the energy sector itself alone, without any other sector, and 2,000 in ferronickel, and lead and zinc, if I'm not wrong, 22,000. This was the capacity of Trepča, the actual capacity. So that's not something new. That's only something that existed before that we do not have right now. So we can reach that. It existed. That's important to know.
The 20,000 are not excluding Trepča. Trepča was a consortium with all other units across Kosovo, even in Serbia, that altogether made around 21,000. So not only Trepča and the new Trepča, so this number is not related to only the money in Trepča. My question is, would it have been better to work with a modified multiplier, because the simple change of multiplier maybe is a little bit overstated?
Based on the assumptions, I just wanted to see how GDP might profit from that, and you saw I also made the assumption that all of that money remains in the economy. I just wanted to show the potential.
Yes, but to me, if you use
The simple change of multiplier, still more from the total benefit from the money, maybe 20, 40 million a year, is very pessimistic.
To be honest, I try to be pessimistic. I used the most pessimistic numbers possible, actually.
When you told us at the beginning that somebody has valued only the coal around 1 trillion.
Yes,
And then
but you saw I didn't use that number. I didn't use that number for my calculations. So for the calculations, for the projections that I made myself at the end of the paper, I just used pessimistic numbers.
But this is my point. We value all of our natural resources at 22 billion. This is pretty much that what Dubai exports in 1 month, only oil.
Yes, but
We are not really rich when we assume that we are, so it should be much more than even 100 billion.
yes, well, I told you, Economic Initiative also said that it would be 13.5 to 25 billion. So I was in that range, and they make clear that it is a pessimistic number. So do I.
Well,
the ACE study,
it's not very serious. Actually, the goal was to prove that Trepča is not improved as a non-focusing Trepča.
Okay.
And last question, do you want to?
Yeah, just a short, maybe clarification. So, what is the time span when you're doing these projections that you're looking at? Because we know that the resources will deplete eventually. You know, when you're doing projections about Kosovo's future potential to develop
in the
center, and also what were the prices you were looking at? Because if we look at on the longer term, we know that the prices of certain minerals do change. Sometimes they increase,
Yes, they do.
sometimes they don't. So I'm just wondering, how did you come up with these numbers?
Yes, it is throughout the paper. I mentioned projections for how many years. I told you that it is 40 years for the lead and zinc sector, 40 to 60. I gave you the numbers about coal, and I tried to make that consistent throughout the paper. Also to add how long can we use that? I am aware of the fact that we cannot use them eternally. It is made clear in the paper, and the prices, most of the prices were from. I tried to find sources that are as reliable as possible. Most of them from the London Mineral Exchange, and that was basically the most difficult part of the assignment to find these prices because they do not want you to know those prices. They make money with these prices, and it was very difficult to find recent to find current numbers. So I found numbers that were months old.
Thank you so much.
Can I just ask a very quick?
Yes, you can.
It's obviously, tremendous potential that we're talking about. But if, say, you were to spend another year doing this project, what are the two most important things you'd investigate in more depth? What are the two most important things you'd like to do more?
I saw this example of Norway, and they have this fund, this national pension fund, which makes basically every Norwegian a millionaire in Norwegian krona, in their currency. And they invest only the financial return on that fund. So they do not invest the oil money itself. They only invest the financial return that they make on the financial market in so they invest only that financial return, and which is approximately 2% of that fund every year. And so you see they didn't give in to that temptation to spend everything at once. And I would like to see that in Kosovo, so that we can make sustainable, so that we can develop sustainably and not suffer from the Dutch disease, which can I elaborate on that?
No, but briefly, what is the second thing?
I would say legislation. That is very important to have a reliable legal sector, because these are huge investments that companies will have to make, and you have to know that you invest your money in a country where you will benefit and not suffer from your investment. Thank you very much.
So the next student is Loras Chahaya with a topic on feasibility studies on future exchange of agricultural commodities in Kosovo, with project supervisor Professor Edmond Muhajeri and advisor Besnik Bislimi Mrika Kotori.
Yeah, mentor, I know that's a long title. Don't worry. Okay, Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm going to present the feasibility studies on futures exchange for agricultural commodities in Kosovo. The aim of the paper is to study the possibility of the Kosovo to establish futures market here in Kosovo, namely agriculture futures market. So the entire paper has the difference between the forwards and futures contracts. It also presents economic data for Kosovo, because I have related the entire paper with those economic data and see if Kosovo can really do such things here. My methodology actually is literature review, because it's the first time doing in Kosovo such things. So I have seen what South Africa, India, and Iran did, and based on what they did, I have established some hypotheses that Kosovo needs to have in order to establish such market. Also, those hypotheses are going to be discussed throughout the paper, and at the end are the conclusions and recommendations. Agriculture futures exchange in Kosovo, the idea to make those futures exchange in Kosovo came from a problem in exporting that Kosovo faced in 2009. Kosovo exports agriculture commodities mainly with Albania. And in 2009, Albania put a 20% tax in the exports of potatoes, but they estimated the price to be 50 cents per kilogram. Actually, Kosovo exports potatoes 20 to 25 cents per kilogram, and they estimated 50 cents based on their local demand for potatoes. Adding to this 50 cents, the 11 cents for transportation costs drove the Kosovo farmers out of the market. They couldn't really export those products, and they just needed to come back with the potatoes here and sell those in Kosovo. This decreased the price in Kosovo, the price of potato, because the supply of potatoes increased, and also made farmers have huge losses. If at that time in 2009 there would be futures exchange, this would not happen, because people, farmers and investors would agree with each other, for example, at a specific time in the future, and they would say that for example, 1 year after, we will trade this amount of potatoes at this price of potatoes. That's the main role that futures exchange have. So futures exchange have been first established in Japan 400 years ago, agriculture futures exchange. First, there were forward contracts. Forward contracts and futures contracts are basically the same thing. They are agreements to sell or buy an item for a certain price at the future times, with the only difference that the futures are standardized. They have standardized quantity and they have which needs to be traded. Two main fundamental strategies that each of us should know for futures are going long and going short. Going long, it means have an agreement to buy something. For example, an investor would make an agreement with a farmer in Kosovo to buy potatoes. They would agree at the price for a future time. So when the time comes, if the price is higher in the market, say for example today, they agreed that they are going to pay 30 cents per kilogram, and if at the future the price of the potatoes is 50 cents, actually the investor benefits because he's going to pay a lesser price that actually is in the market. If the price doesn't change, no one loses here. Going short is basically the opposite of going long. Going short, it means a farmer who wants to sell potatoes. If the price now for the potatoes, the agreed price is 30 cents per kilogram, for example, in the future, if this price drops to 20 cents, it means that they are going to sell potatoes with a higher price than it is actually in the market. So again, if the price stays the same, then no one loses from the futures market. Margin requirements are really important. They are as collateral put there for everyone who wants to trade. For example, there are two parties. I have been mentioned that there should be farmers and investors, of course. But if one of the farmers or the investor decides to leave the agreement, then the counterparty will be harmed. In order for the counterparty not to be harmed, there is a margin account set where each party needs to put 5% of the amount that they traded, so that if anybody leaves the trade, the other counterparty that has been harmed is going to take this 5% amount. In order to study the feasibility studies, the possibility of Kosovo to make such futures exchange here, we need to relay. I need to relate this with economic data. Agriculture is really important in Kosovo. It constitutes more than 20% share of the GDP. 53% of the land in Kosovo is agricultural land, and 39% of that is arable agricultural land. And what is more important, it constitutes 22% of the overall employment in Kosovo. Those data are taken from the Statistical Agency of Kosovo. Cereals and vegetables are the two main agricultural outputs of Kosovo. And the entire project, honors project, is focused on three main categories of agriculture: fruits, vegetables, and cereals. Cereals focusing mainly in wheat, grain, and maize. In fruits, in pears and apples, and in cereals, potatoes. Actually, the entire project is focused more on potatoes, but if we reach to make such things for potatoes, then it is very easy to make for the other agriculture products. Here we can see the production of potatoes in Kosovo. As we can see, the potatoes constitutes the higher production in tons in Kosovo, and also the highest yield, also with the cabbages there. Also are presented the production regions, which are very important when we want to establish futures contracts. Also, this table was taken from the Statistical Agency of Kosovo. As I mentioned before, I focused on seeing what three main developing countries have done in order to establish futures market. I have chosen South Africa, Iran, and Iraq, and India, and see what they have done and what challenges they faced to reach a successful futures exchange. The main challenges that South Africa faced were price volatility, high storage and transportation costs, lack of quality and quantity standards, and lack of rule of law. The price volatility is really important because it causes investors not to trade there. If there are many price volatility, it drives investors out of the market. So a country that wants to make futures exchange, they need to address this issue. High storage and transportation costs is related mainly because South Africa first established a paper-based exchange. They didn't have the computer exchange that is nowadays for futures market. They needed to come into a place where traders will meet with the farmers, they would agree for the price, each one will see each other for once trading. This is not really happening now in exchange because all of it is computerized and everyone is really just clicking and making those trades with the clicks. So because of this paper base, the transportation costs were so high and the storage costs were so high. Lack of quality and quantity standards were also associated with the lack of the contract did not have specified quality and quantity standards. These were because Africa lacked a laboratory that would really see if the quality and the quantity specified in the contracts is being really that the farmers are claiming. Lack of rule of law and well-established institutions is the last one, but it's the most important. If farmers and traders are not protected, that they are going to have the right, they are going to have their rights, then the futures market would not really function. So the lack of rule of law and well-established institutions, you are going to see them in all of the developing countries, since developing countries are really having those problems, but all of these three have managed to take off this challenge and see what they can do in terms of futures exchange. What can Kosovo basically learn from South Africa is that we can create an initiative body before starting the futures exchange. The initiative bodies would have the role to inform everyone about the futures importance and inform everyone why futures should really be traded here in Kosovo and what they can do for the economic development of Kosovo. Credible warehouse receipt system is that the importance of warehouses is that impacts the quality of the products. We know that agriculture products needs to be stored when they are produced until the time for the trading comes. Those are going to be stored in warehouses. If those warehouses are not built with quality, then the quality of the potatoes or the agriculture products are going to be also questioned. Support the financial sector and support of insurance companies is really essential in establishing futures exchange, because without the financial sectors, the futures exchange would not be really happening, because financial sector, insurance companies, and government are really the three main institutions that need support the agriculture futures exchange in Kosovo. India also had legal challenges, meaning they did not really did not implement the rule of law, poor management, regulatory challenges, and lack of logistic organization were all connected with a lack of strong monitoring system. There was no strong monitoring system that will see what futures exchange are going to be in India and what farmers and what traders are specifically doing in India. It is very important to create awareness among farmers for the importance of futures, because if farmers do not know what they are going to benefit for themselves, then they are not going to be part of the futures exchange. Without farmers, agriculture futures exchange would not really function. So they also had problems on contract compilation, meaning that the quantity and quality specified in the contract oftentimes did not rely with those that really were traded. So investors were having many problems in India because when they took the trade, the quantity was not what was specified in the contract, and also the quality was really not what they have agreed before. What Kosovo can learn from India and not repeat the same mistakes is establish an evaluation committee. The main role for the evaluation committee is to see the market, how is the market going, what needs to be changed, evaluate the market prices, and everything that has to do with the futures market. Also, a very important factor or very important function of the evaluation committee would be to create awareness. In India, for example, the evaluation committee hold more than 800 awareness programs in many places over the India, just to inform the farmers about the importance of futures exchange. So this one is also related with the establishing of the strong monitoring system, because if there is not a monitoring system that really sees how the regulatory office is really operating and sees how the prices are going, what is being traded, if it needs to be traded more or less, or the quantity or the quality, then if there is lack of strong monitoring system that would see if the regulations is obeyed from the futures system, then it is really a bad thing, and Kosovo could not really establish without having this strong monitoring system. Challenges faced in Iran. There are also here you may see that the things are being repeated as lack of information and contract size and sharp fluctuation of prices. Lack of information means that when investors wanted to invest in Iran, they did not have the information about the prices, which is really important, because when I want to trade something, I want to know what the price is, if it is going to change. I want to know the economic market data and see what is going to change or not. So it's really important to have the information in order to attract the investors to invest in the country. Lack of transparency in the market is also related with the prices, because, as I mentioned before, there were no prices in Iran, specific prices that need assessment, and also the contract size is also related with the quantity, that also India had no specific quantities, and the quantities that were traded oftentimes resulted in problems for the investors and for the farmers. What Kosovo can do based on what Iran did, meaning what Kosovo can learn from Iran, is that we can build quality testing laboratories. It means that before each contract is going to be agreed, there is a laboratory testing that will go to each farmers and see if the quality is that specified in the contracts. This is really important, because if investors know that the quality is being evaluated, is being monitored from someone, then they will know that they will have no default, and will create the trust for Kosovo market, and will start to make futures exchange here, agriculture futures exchange. Also, what Iran failed was the centrally planned futures exchange. At the beginning, they developed this centrally planned futures exchange, but this created a huge fiscal burden to the government, and they switched to private enterprise, meaning that they made the regulatory office as private. It doesn't mean that government needs not to intervene, needs not to see the exchange office. The role of the government is really important. It's important to make policies, to make rules, and see if everyone is obeying through the rule. But the main focus here is not to be planned and to be functioned by the government. In order for Kosovo to establish the futures market, there are 7 hypotheses that Kosovo needs to have, and each country, if they want to establish futures market. The first one is macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability is measured through GDP fluctuations, exchange fluctuations in a country, and also the unemployment rate. If we see the GDP fluctuation in Kosovo, it hasn't been so much. From the last 5 years, it was 5.2, 4.9, it really didn't fluctuate most, but we cannot base our data only on GDP fluctuation, because if we return to the unemployment rate, we can see that Kosovo has more than 40% unemployment rate, and this is really bad for our country. But what can really be seen as an advantage of Kosovo is that we don't have exchange fluctuations, and this is because we adopted euro. Euro comes from other states, and the central bank in Kosovo does not have the possibility to print money here, because we don't control the euro. Therefore, we cannot really cause much inflations. As we can see here, the data are taken from the World Bank data. Kosovo had, in 2013, the inflation in Kosovo is 2.4%. We can see that the inflation rose in 2008, and this is connected to the euro and euro crisis. What happened in Europe with the crisis in exchange rates. The second hypothesis is that contracts should be different from other existing contracts. We mentioned that Kosovo is going to establish potatoes futures contracts. It's going to start with this one. As I have seen, there is no potatoes futures exchange traded actually in the world. So Kosovo could be the first country giving those kinds of futures exchange, and this in turn would attract investors to come here and start. So it's a really good start for Kosovo to make potatoes futures exchange. The third one is presence of sufficient large domestic market for the underlying product. Kosovo, we saw before that potatoes constitute the highest production in Kosovo. Also, Kosovo exports potatoes, so Kosovo has this third hypothesis. Also, Kosovo has 40%. It's really 60% of local demand is by Kosovo producers of potatoes. Is reached actually by the Kosovo producer of potatoes, and 40% is imported from the other countries. So we can say that Kosovo does not really encompass all 100% of the market with the production of potatoes, but 60% for small and developing countries is quite a good number. The fourth one is the presence of committed actors. As I mentioned before, it's really important to have the support of financial institutions, insurance companies, and also the government and private enterprises. Those committed actors have the main function to provide liquidity. When first Kosovo initiates this futures exchange, it is important that maybe we are going to face problems with the liquidity, and financial institutions and government could provide this liquidity to the market by providing money to trade and make the trade trustable. So the government role is also to enact policies and to enact rules and see if futures market is obeying through the rules. The last one is the farmers. Farmers are really important because farmers are those that are going to make the futures, the agriculture futures exchange. The fifth one is low level of industry integration. For agriculture, it means that we have production, processing, and retailing. Since Kosovo has small farmers, oftentimes farmers produce by themselves, they process those by themselves, and then they go to the market and sell them. So it is not a very good level of industry integration in Kosovo. If Kosovo wants to really establish those, Kosovo needs to work in this industry integration and make, for example, farmers need to specialize in production, other companies, private enterprises need to specialize in processing, and also the retailing should be done from other companies. The sixth one is the export orientation of the underlying agriculture products. We saw that, and we mentioned before, that Kosovo meets 60% of local demand. It also exports potatoes, so it has this hypothesis in order to make the futures exchange. The last one is the establishment of the institution, well-functioning clearinghouse, and regulations. The regulatory office is the one that makes the exchange. So traders and farmers will meet through regulatory office and make their exchange. The clearing brokerage is the person, the individual, that assures that everything is going to be according to the law. The clearing brokerage sets the agreement, sets the rules, and then they send the contract to the regulatory office. Continuous cooperation with the government is important because government can incentivize financial institutions through tax and other means to cooperate and make the futures exchange be successful in Kosovo. The potato board, this potato board was taken from Iran. They have established a wheat board, and the function of this board is to go out in the market, see how the price is changing, take market data and price data, and tell the regulatory office what is happening in the market. So the regulatory office is going to be all the time informed about what is happening and what changes should they make. here are agricultural prices in Kosovo. The prices are per kilogram, so the prices changed from 2005 to 2011. The 2011 was the last data for the agricultural prices. As we can see here, wheat was traded for the 25 cents per kilogram, and maize was traded with a 29 cents for the kilogram. You can also see the others agriculture products and how the prices differed from 2005 to 2011. Sorry. This was for the agriculture prices in Kosovo, how much a kilogram is traded. But this one is the formula that represents the futures exchange and how the prices are going to determine in the futures exchange. How prices are going to determine is really a broad topic and needs special assessment. However, I just presented this formula here in order to understand how this goes, how the entire process goes. The first F is the futures price for agricultural commodities in year T, which is determined in year T minus 1. This means that it is the price after 1 year. If we agreed today for a price, today is T minus 1 year, but T is the price after 1 year. Let's say 1 year, because it can be 3 months, 6 months, but we take an example that would be 1 year. Also, S is the spot price, is the price now. We agreed for this price and is the price in the market. The E is the E number, of course. The 365 days are 1 year. The formula assumes that the trade is going to be for 1 year. And also the C is the constant, which includes the storage cost, the transportation cost, everything that is not included in the formula here. Because there are futures exchange also for investment financials, but the formula for them changes from the agriculture, because agriculture contains this constant that involves the storage cost and all of the other costs not included in the formula. Why is it important for Kosovo to develop futures market? There are 4 main reasons: to reduce the price volatility and risk, to provide liquid market, provide security and transparency, and provide information. Security is going to provide through the margins. I explained before that the margins are there as an account to take the harmed party because they have been harmed from someone that just decided to leave the market. Transparency is going to be set because of the prices. Everyone is going to see what prices are going to be in Kosovo and if they want to trade with those prices or not. Information is that Kosovo will not only have information about futures exchange, but there will be presented information about the whole economic indicators of the Kosovo. So this means that Kosovo will also attract investors and attract attention from the others and see where Kosovo is and what is Kosovo doing. Provide liquid market and reduce price volatility and risk are connected with each other, and there is the role of the government and financial institutions that need really to assess the same. So in conclusion, based on the market data, based on what other countries have done, specifically South Africa, India, and Iran, I have concluded that Kosovo has possibility to do such futures market for agriculture products. We might start with agriculture products, but we might also continue with the others if we see that we have success in agriculture products. Also, hypothesis testing have been conducted in order to reach this conclusion. My recommendations are to sensitize people for the importance of regulatory office, create a practice platform for farmers in Kosovo before launching futures exchange, because farmers need to know how the futures exchange are going to be done. So they need to practice before they actually start trading with investors around the world. Make Kosovo a center of futures market in the region. Actually, only Macedonia has such futures, agriculture futures exchange, and for the regional countries, Kosovo could really be successful and start everyone coming here and start trading for agriculture products. Strengthen the implementation and protection of consumer rights. Each investor and each farmer entering to the trade needs really to have the security that their rights are going to be valued, and they have somewhere where they need to complain. And the last one is the foster economic development of Kosovo, because through agriculture trading, we are going to improve agriculture economic of Kosovo. This was my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, feel free to make them. Less than 10. Okay.
I have a quick question. So most of the farmers in Kosovo are fairly small.
Yeah.
And every time you sign a contract or you enter into a contract with somebody, that creates a transaction cost.
Yeah.
There are two ways to get around this, typically, in other agricultural developing countries, and that is cooperatives, which has a very strange legacy here in Kosovo, given
Yeah.
its communistic heritage.
And there is no such small cooperative that could really.
There are
Yeah.
some
Okay.
that are working, you just don't call them cooperatives. And then the other thing is to essentially sell your products to an aggregator. So somebody comes along to your farm, buys up all your potatoes,
Yeah.
and then that person is going to be entering into this forward contracting market.
Like Africa did with a paper base, like they were meeting with each other.
Yes, and you still have to have storage, you still have to have transportation costs,
Yeah.
all of those things. But you have potentially less in the way of transactions. How is it that you're going to essentially make farmers more involved in the system, given that they're very limited in their bargaining power, very limited in their production, and the way the system here in Kosovo is set up, very much set up against them getting fair prices or simply getting prices that they would want to be involved with. So how would you essentially get farmers to buy into the system, given all of these other things and all of these problems in all of these other countries?
There was a committee established in India, and I think that Kosovo should really do this before starting exchanges. This committee would have to keep so much awareness programs and go to each farmer, explain what they are going to benefit, how the trade is going to do, and explain all the futures market regulations and everything, how they are going to be protected and everything else. If they understand the benefits of the futures market, and if they understand that they are really going to be protected by the government, then they are going to trade, because actually they are not exporting and they are not producing that much here in Kosovo. So it is to their benefit also to start producing more, to start exporting and gain benefit for themselves. So it is best for them to establish those futures market, start creating interest for those futures market, and start making profit rather than staying where they are and not producing anything. So the importance would be here for the government, because the government should all the time provide supports for them and tell them that they are going to be there even if they have problems with the contracts, problems with the quantity, and everything that the futures trade will enact. Hopefully.
Question is more the direction of income protection and price volatility. Maybe price floors or something like that.
I mean, like, you have to essentially incentivize the farmers to want to be participating in this marketplace. And there's so many things that are set up against them.
The bargaining powers,
Yeah.
So pretty much there must be a base price that protects their
Yeah.
When you think of countries like India and Iran, there's such huge differences, whether it's agriculture, the economy, social differences, and so on. Could you explain what criteria did you use for using those three case studies to compare Kosovo with those three countries? How did you choose those three countries?
I chose those three countries because I have presented this in the paper. They have the agriculture background, same as Kosovo. They are more for agriculture, they produce agriculture, they have agriculture possibility to develop the economy of their country, and also they depend on the agriculture products because most of their population is also related with agriculture products. I have taken some of these data and see if they really are same with the Kosovo, and then applied the analysis. Seems so.
I think we're over. We have no more presentations. We had only 3 students. I want to thank you again, Lourdes, Carolinda, Arif, and also the professors who supervise the projects. And we're looking forward to the grades and the next year's presentations, of course. The event is over. Thank you very much.